So I think that we can move into today. If you want to go to Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 1, I think that we can do this quick and easy. Well, not the material, but we can at least do our lead up, get into our Hebrews 8 quick and easy. Starting in chapter 4, the very end of chapter 4, we've been focusing on Jesus as a better high priest. So, it's easy to keep this in straight in your mind in categories. Jesus is better than angels. He has a better word. Jesus is better than Moses. He's a better leader, and he actually leads his people into the real promised land. Better than the angels, better than Moses. He's a better high priest. So, we're going to kind of transition today, but if you're keeping your mind in boxes, go ahead and leave your mind in the high priest box. That's where I'm going to try and I'm normally good at only doing one thing at a time. So leave your mind in the high priest box. It'll be easier, and we can stay clearer and more focused on what we're talking about if we do that. Even though there's other pieces. Well, what about the law? Well, what about the place? And all this other stuff. High priest. Okay, so in the high priest box, that Jesus is a better high priest. The first piece of that is that Jesus' priesthood is better than the Old Testament priesthood. I'm calling that the Levitical priesthood. Or if you wanted to call it the Aaronic, the priesthood where the high priests were descended from Aaron. Jesus' priesthood is better than that because Jesus' priesthood is after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek is better than the Old Testament system. That's the first major category of what we talked about. In our last class, in the high priest box, in our last class, what we did was we talked about how Jesus' priesthood is better because of the word forever. Just all you have to do is remember that word, forever. That's the key for this one. It builds off of Psalm 110. You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. And so we spent some time doing red and green. Old Testament law, priesthood, the New Testament. Old Testament, New Testament. So here's the priesthood box. Order of Melchizedek. Forever versus not forever. And then today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the priesthood still, but we're going to talk about the place where the priest operated. So it's better in terms of timing, forever, and it's also better in terms of its place, where the physical location of the priesthood happens. So that's going to be our key for today, to talk about Jesus is a priest in a better place. Got it? I'm trying to. I know it's a lot. Like I know I'm being overbearing about this, but I think that this section, starting at about chapter 7, from 7 to 10, it gets awfully convoluted. And if we can just keep it clear and in clear boxes, it will be easier to process. For me, it is anyway. Okay. Any comments or questions up to this point about any of this, especially Jesus as a better high priest? All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. This morning, would somebody please... Oh, wait. I think I've got something for you here. Yes. Remember we looked at this last time? Jesus is a better high priest. You've got the Old Testament Levitical priesthood, and you've got Jesus. And this whole, that really starting from about here down, this whole section is about Jesus as after the order of Melchizedek. Everything under the line is Jesus is a better high priest because of forever. I'm sorry, I should have had that up there for you. It would have been easier to talk about it. But this is our transition into today's class. Back in 4:14, the very first thing that was mentioned about Jesus and his high priesthood was the place where he serves as a high priest, that he has passed through the heavens. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to fill that out and talk about the place a little bit more. Okay, there's that. I think this will get us started. Would somebody please read chapter 8 and verses 1 through 6? And as you're reading, this is our conversation. So this is what you're looking for, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how is Jesus' priesthood better because of the place where he serves. So go ahead and read that for us, please.
Now the point in what we are saying is this. We have such a high priest, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, and minister in the holy places in the true tent that the Lord set up, not man. For every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Thus, it is necessary for this priest also to have something to offer. Now, if he were on earth, he would not be priest at all, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the law. They serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. For when Moses was about to erect the tent, he instructed by God, saying, "See that you make everything according to the pattern that was shown to you on the mountain. But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is as much more excellent than the old covenant. He mediates it better, since he is enacted on better promises."
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, what do you see about anything about this text? It's open floor time, but I would like to talk about place. What do you see about the place argument here? What did you say? I can't hear, I'm sorry.
Right hand.
At the right hand of God, that was one of the things that's listed. So chapter 8 and verse 1, we have such a high priest, one who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty, and then in heaven. That would be, in fact, I think I wrote that up here for you. Well, I'm going to hold on before I hit click next. What else do you see? Yep, Ryan?
If you were on the earth, you wouldn't be a priest at all.
Okay, so there's our contrast. If you wanted to do a red and a green, I think that would be the words to use, because in chapter 8 and verse 1, I'm going to start in the middle, that he's seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven. And then this is the reason why I'm being so overbearing about trying to be clear about what we're talking about right now. Because when you get into 3 and 4, it's kind of like this. You know when you're talking to your kids and you're like, I want you to know something, and you're talking to your kids and they go like this. No, come back to me. You know what I'm saying? This is what happens all the time. I kind of feel like that's what's happening in verses 3 and 4. Every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Thus, it is necessary for the priest to have something to offer. And now we're talking about priests and how they offer sacrifices, and it's necessary. This is what they do. And then I think what you do is you contrast to Ryan's point. Now, if he were on earth, there's a contrast, right? Yes, we're talking about what the priest does with their sacrifices, but the focus is where he does those things. And so Jesus is in heaven, but if Jesus were on earth, then he wouldn't be able to serve as a priest, because that's a Levitical thing. Let's keep going. What else do you see? Yep, Cindy?
In verse 2, he's talking about that he's a minister in the sanctuary, and it is in the true tabernacle.
Okay. You have a New American Standard, right? And so in verse 2, does yours say that he's a minister in the sanctuary? Is that what it says? Really?
Minister in the sanctuary.
Oh,
In the true tabernacle.
let's do this now, because I didn't do that. I'm not prepared. I didn't know. that's what the New American Standard said. But what I was going to say, let me just throw this one up here for you so we can see these three things. Jesus' priesthood is better location-wise. He's in heaven. The ESV says in the holy places, and then you took us here too, in the true tent. But Cindy, can you help me with your New American Standard? Because one of the things that I would like for everybody to do, and who has a New King James Version? Lisa, what does yours say in verse 2? Okay, sanctuary 2. So let's do this right now. Because I have this thing in my notes to say, with my ESV it says he's a minister in the holy places. And I got a little star there to say, we're not going to do this yet, but make sure that you see that word, the holy places, or in your version, the sanctuary, because that word is going to be something that matters as we roll through this text. So look at this as an example, chapter 9 and verse 8. My ESV says, by this the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy places is not yet opened. Do you have sanctuary there too? What, you have holy places? Okay, well, what do you have in the New American Standard? Holy places. So it's, okay, so on this occasion, again, equal opportunity Bible critic here. On this occasion, I would say, let's go with the ESV on this because we're going to stay consistent. Let's stay consistent with our words. So in verse 2, 8:2, Jesus is a minister in the holy places. Chapter 9 and verse 8, by this the Holy Spirit indicates the way into the holy places is not yet open. Chapter 9 and verse 12, he entered once for all into the holy places. What do you have in verse 12? What? You have 3 different words. What about the New American Standard?
It says, entered the holy place.
3 different words. Oh, you had holy places in the second one too, so 2 different words, yeah. Okay, well, here's the thing. We'll talk about this. We're not ready to talk about it now. I just want you, the idea of Jesus going into the holy places is going to be a major point of conversation later. And I'm glad that we're doing this now because that just means that you need to pay extra attention if you're dealing with different words. And so we'll clarify that later. I just want to point out for now, hey, listen, here's where Jesus works. This is his workplace, his business address, in heaven, in the holy places, or the sanctuary, or the tabernacle, and in the true tent. That true tent is important for this conversation too. That's a pretty good workplace. Anybody got anything you want to say about where Jesus' priesthood is in these 3 places? So, yep.
Well, that the Lord pitched it, not man.
Yes. Yes. I mean, if we're going to talk about like the true tent versus the tabernacle, which is going to be our next conversation, you know, who built the tabernacle? Jake. You know, Jake, hey, design the stuff, put it together. Versus God who's like, I got this. This is mine. That's better. Yep.
Is there a difference, and maybe it gets into this, between holy places, which is some people are having that rendered tabernacle, but then tent means tabernacle? Like, is the author drawing a distinction between the tent, but then like the tent?
Yeah.
Or, it seems like it's just repeating words.
Well,
I get that heaven is separate, but holy places and tabernacle seems the same to me.
well, there's a holy places inside the tabernacle. So they're different. And especially, this holy places is also going to refer to the holy places inside the earthly tabernacle later. I'm just planting seeds to really pay attention to that word because it's important, but I want you to see it. Like, we're starting and I want you to see it. But yeah. And also, I'll just tell you, like, Cindy threw me off on that one. No, I should be prepared for these things. I'm normally like to be prepared, but I'm unprepared because my first thing is I should have right-clicked and word studied on that and traced it rather than just following it through my ESV. I should know better than that, and I didn't. So I will be prepared next time for that. Okay, did we have another one? Okay, so here is Jesus' place. Listen, it's not hard. This is where people start to complain that Hebrews gets hard. This is not hard. The first major section is timing. He's better priest because it's forever. The second section is place. He's a better priest because of the place. This is not difficult. I think if you can just keep it simple. Okay, verses 3 and 4, we've already introduced this. Don't get distracted by the working and the ministry and all of that. Just pay attention to the place. Every high priest is appointed to offer gifts and sacrifices. Thus, it is necessary for the priest also to have something to offer. Okay, so let's talk about that priesthood. If Jesus were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the law. And we've already talked about that Jesus is from the tribe of Judah and not from the tribe of Levi. And so if Jesus were a priest here, he couldn't even be a priest. But he's a priest after the order of Melchizedek at God's right hand, and so he is a priest, just not the same kind of priest that we are familiar with in the Old Testament. Anything you want to say about that contrast in heaven versus on earth? Okay, number 3. Let's talk about verse 5. Let's still talk about place language. But in verse 5, what are we going to say about the place of Jesus' priesthood versus the Levitical priesthood?
Everything on earth is a shadow of the things that's coming.
Yes. A copy and a shadow. So there's 2 words, and I'm not sure. I'm about to tell you something that I'm not proud of. This is not a big deal. It's just what I do in my Bible, but it's horrendous. And this is the kind of thing that I have nightmares about. Sometimes when I'm out of colors and I don't know how to write something, I'll just take a pencil and draw a line across the page from one word to the other word. I would be really embarrassed for you to see that in my Bible, but I can't think of a better way to do it. So you've got 2 comparisons here happening in verse 5. The Old Testament priests, the Levitical priests, they serve a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. For when Moses was about to erect the tent, he was instructed by God, saying, "See that you make everything according to the pattern." The pattern is the good thing. That's the heavenly thing. So the line in my Bible would be these 2 things. In verse 2, you have the true tent. And in verse 5, you have the pattern for Jesus. Jesus is working in the true tent. He's working in the pattern. But the Old Testament priesthood are only copies and shadows of the true tent and the pattern. So you need to find some way to make sure that those things are connected in your mind, that you can see those 2 things. And obviously, I think we don't probably need to talk about this, but see my shadow? Which one is better, the real thing or the shadow of the thing? Well, obviously, the real thing is better, right? So Jesus is a priest in the true tent, in the real thing. The Old Testament priesthood, the tabernacle, we'll read this in just a second. It's just it's a copy of the real thing. So the real thing is better. Anything you want to say before we dive into that conversation? Yep.
I just have a note that says a shadow would not have details, no details.
Did you notice my shadow too? There's like different lines and it's fuzzy around the edge. Yeah, that's right.
And I have a note on the word copy, but sorry, I can't make it out.
Maybe I can help. Others on that? Let's look at the pattern thing, because this is, I would think you would want these written in your Bible so that you could, see this. Go to Exodus 25. In Exodus 25, the Hebrew writer is not just making up the idea that the tabernacle is designed and constructed after the pattern. It's actually in the text. And so you might want to make like a chain through these different verses. Excuse me. Exodus 25 is where God starts to tell Moses. So in Exodus 20 you have the 10 Commandments. In 24 you have the Old Covenant. It's ratified. We now have the Old Covenant. In 25, this is where we start to say, now that we have a covenant with each other, let's build this out. We need a place with stuff and priests and sacrifices. So we're going to talk about that place. And so look at chapter 25 and verse 8. Let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. And then listen to this. Exactly as I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and of all its furniture, so you shall make it. So Moses is up on Mount Sinai with God, and he's seeing something. And God says, this thing that you're seeing up on Mount Sinai with God, look at this thing, and then go back and build the tabernacle according to what you saw, according to what I showed you. There's another one in verse 40. See, this is talking about the golden lampstands. See that you make them after the pattern for them, which is being shown you on the mountain. In chapter 26 and verse 30, we're talking about the actual tabernacle, the tent here. 26:30. Then you shall erect the tabernacle according to the plan for it that you were shown on the mountain. In chapter 27 and verse 8, we're talking about the bronze altar. You shall make it hollow with boards as it has been shown to you on the mountain, so it shall be made. And so that's the thing. Those passages are the thing that the Hebrew writer is referring to. The Old Testament tabernacle system where the priests work, it's a copy and a shadow of the real thing that Moses saw. The heavenly thing that Moses saw on Mount Sinai, the spiritual reality, the true tent, whatever you want to call it. So Jesus' priesthood is better because he's working in the true tent, not the copy or the pattern of the true tent. Location.
Probably is a stupid question. So what was shown on the mountain was the real thing, like they saw the real thing, so they're having to pattern it after. Did he see the real thing?
I think that there's two ways that I'll answer this, okay? One is, let me do this one. I don't think that I can say from the text yes to what you said, but I can say, yes, that's what I think. Do you know what I'm saying? What it says in the text is Moses is on the mountain, and God says, make this according to what you've been shown. But I would go farther to say, God was showing Moses the spiritual reality, and he's going to go back and build the tabernacle after that. But I don't think that I can prove that from the text, which is why you're asking the question.
If I'm going to make a dress, or if I'm going to make a building, and I get the pattern, I see the dress, and I go back and I make it based on what I saw on the dress. Or if I make that dress based on the pattern I got from the manufacturer, I got an official copy of the pattern. It could be different than just making it per what you thought you saw.
Yeah. Isn't that true for everything, though? Like if you get something from the box and you open up the instructions and it's like showing you pieces, it's like, no, show me the outside of the box so I can know what this thing is supposed to look like, right? That's like, I want to see it so I know what I'm building.
I think we're already hitting on it, but it's like a timeless principle of God that he says, here's the pattern, you adhere everything in the Bible really an example that we need to follow, but like, this is how God works.
Yeah.
This is the way to do it. Go and do it without substitutions, without your own input. Follow the pattern. I think that's timeless.
Yeah. Can I just stop here? Like, we've done this a couple of times with the silence thing. We did this in Hebrews chapter 1. Where did God ever say this about an angel? And we were like, look, God is using the principle of silence. We did it in Hebrews 7. Where did God ever say this about a priesthood out? And so we've done this a couple of times. I think it's worth pausing because Adam is saying what he's saying for a reason. Like, it's not just, hey, this is a good comment to say right now. It's because there's a lot of stuff happening in the world, in the Christian world, where a lot of our brethren are saying things like, God never intended, when He gave us the Bible, He never intended for us to follow pattern theology. It's like, spit it out of your mouth. Pattern theology. Ew. And what Adam is saying is, yes, He did. It's a timeless principle, and you can see it. Like, you can see it right here. He said, this is what I'm showing you, so do that thing. So make sure that you hear the point that Adam's making, because it's an important one. Not necessarily for Hebrews, but it's an important one to see how God operates. Good. Do you have something? Anything else? Location. Location, location, location. Jesus' priesthood is better. You can write it with your orange pen because that's a section. In the last one, it's better because of timing. His is forever. In this one, it's better because of location. He's in the true tent. Okay. We're going to still talk about location, but we're going to transition a little bit. Just a little bit. In verse 6, so we're talking about how if Jesus was on earth, Ryan Giesing brought this up. I don't remember if it was last class or maybe several classes ago. I don't remember. But do you remember when you were saying, wait a second, God told Jesus that His priesthood is forever, but what about all of those places in the Old Testament where you have a perpetual priesthood in the Old Testament? Like, didn't He tell the Old Testament priests that they would be a priesthood forever too? Now it's time to talk about that. In verse 6, as it is, Christ has obtained a better ministry that is much more excellent than the old, as the covenant He mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises. So the answer initially to Ryan's question was, what about when He told the Old Testament priests that they would have a perpetual priesthood? The answer is they do have a perpetual priesthood on earth under that covenant. So long as that covenant is going, Aaron and the Levitical priest are priests in there. But what we're going to transition to here is that Jesus is the mediator of a new covenant. We're not working with the Old Testament system anymore. I think you should do this. We'll really spend some time talking about this probably next class on Wednesday. The word covenant and testament are the same words. So when we talk about the Old Covenant, we're talking about the Old Testament. And what we're doing is we're saying, yeah, that Old Testament was a thing and it was from God, but it's over. Jesus is the mediator of a new covenant. And so we're still talking about Jesus is still a better priest because He's in a better place because of the new covenant. But we're taking this covenant conversation and we're kind of transitioning into the next topic. We're not going to talk about place anymore. We're going to move into new covenant conversations. So let's talk about the new covenant. Would somebody please read verses 7 through 13?
For if the first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second. For He finds fault with them when He says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will establish a
Okay. Does somebody want to summarize the main point here? What's the main point from this little chunk of text about the new covenant? Yeah, Cindy?
They didn't follow the old covenant, so here's the new covenant.
That's going to be a part of it. That's from, our quote's going to be from Jeremiah 31, and he says, the old covenant which they broke. So that's going to be a part of it. What's the argument here, the big argument? Yep, Mike?
Confidence.
Under the new covenant. Why do you have the confidence under the new covenant?
I cheated and read ahead.
Because of the forgiveness of sins?
It's coming in 10. Confidence is the end.
Yeah.
These people lack the confidence.
That's going to be a huge part of it. And like the forgiveness of sins, there's a better sacrifice that has a better result, which gives better confidence. Yep.
This is just a little brain teaser, but Revelation, you see a lot of those copies and shadows in John's vision. Just continuing, carried on.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
There's, I guess, maybe two ways you could look at copies and shadows. You could look at it as don't look at that, or you could look at it as it is. Look at that, because that's those little details they're a preview, and then you just, for example, looking at Revelation out of places you're seeing, those are a preview of something incredible.
Serve the real thing.
Show them through those details. Because, guys, this is the problem. And it, it gets down to something as foundational as Bible study, and just learning to love and enjoy your Bible immensely. And it's just always this constant challenge, drawing near versus shrinking back.
Yeah. Yeah. To see the real thing. Let's go to the real thing. Like, it's hard to understand the real thing, but if I can paint you a picture.
Yeah, this isn't easy. This isn't Harry Potter or something.
Yeah.
It's much more.
Yep, Mark.
I think it's important that Jesus lived in this old covenant. He fulfilled this old covenant. He died in this old covenant. And I think we'll touch on some of those words and the importance of that as we go through here.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, fulfillment is a huge piece. Not erasing, but fulfilling. Rick?
I was going to say, I'll just say it in a different way, that it's, I think you're kind of going off this theme of location. We're not in the temple anymore, we're in your heart. This is a spiritual, not a physical theme.
Yeah. That old covenant was in this location. The new covenant is going to be in a different place. Let me just point you to this, though. In verse 7, this is the main argument. For if the first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second. And what he's doing is he's saying, look at verse 8, the start of Jeremiah 31 there. Behold, days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel. And what the argument is under the old covenant in Jeremiah 31, God is talking about a new covenant. And if the old one was sufficient to do what it needed to do, then he would have never mentioned a new one. Kind of like, why do you need another smoker? You already have one. Which is bad logic, as I've pointed out. But in verse 13, it's the same thing. In speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete is growing old. So in verses 7 through 13, the thing that I think would be best to highlight to make sure that you see this point is the word new. God said, I'm going to give you something new, which inherently means that the old is not sufficient. And so what we're going to do is we're going to transition now to talk about this New covenant versus the old covenant. Go to Jeremiah 31 with me, please. Actually, Jeremiah 31 verses 31 to 34 is quoted completely here. And so you can read it. You can read it in Hebrews if you want, but I like to go back to the source. Jeremiah chapter 31. Maybe some of you will remember this, that Jeremiah 31 is my fifth key passage of the Old Testament, where God says, I'm going to give you a new covenant. This is a really, 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 really big deal. That God says, I'm going to make a new covenant with my people. So let's talk about the new covenant versus the old covenant. Let's read it slowly here together. Verse 31 and 32. I'm in Jeremiah 31 and 32. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. Number one, God had an old covenant with his people. We call it the Old Testament. It started in Exodus 24. He had an old covenant with his people. And almost the entire story of the Old Testament is the story of every way to Friday that Israel came up with to break the covenant that God had with his people. A covenant is an agreement, this contract. And over and over again, Israel said, no, I'm not going to do that. You know what? I think I am going to do that instead. And it's this giant story of Israel constantly breaking God's covenant with them. And what God says in Jeremiah 31 is, I'm going to have a new covenant with a new people, and we're not going to do that anymore. The new covenant is not going to be like the old covenant, where they just continually break it and walk away and violate my terms. We're not doing that again. That's what God says. I'm not doing that again. That's the old covenant. Just kind of as a side note here, that would really speak to the Hebrew audience who's on the verge of walking away from Jesus and the new covenant. And what he's doing is he's saying to this group of people, hey, that thing, we're not doing that anymore. What you're about to do, Hebrew audience, you're about to do what they did, and God said, I'm not doing that anymore. Number two, how will this covenant be different? Well, it will be different because there will be a different kind of people. In verses 33 and 34, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts, and I will be their God. Think about this in the Old Testament story. Over and over again, they ran after other gods. He says in the new covenant, I'm going to be their God, and they're going to be my people. And no longer shall each one teach his neighbor and each his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them. We'll stop there on this point. In the Old Testament system, Kevin was born as a Jew. And because he was born as a Jew, he was born into this Old Testament people of God. And so from childhood, it's Kevin, this is what the Bible says, and this is what you're supposed to do. And then Kevin turns into an adult, and it's like, come on, Kevin, you need to stay inside the lines and all of this. The old covenant system was, you are my covenant people, and I'm going to teach you how to serve me. In the new covenant, it's going to be totally different. The new covenant is not you're born into the covenant and I'm going to teach you how to serve and love the Lord. The new covenant is you are a part of the new covenant because you want to serve and love the Lord. That's the determining factor here. It's not that, come on, come on, come on, there's this covenant, you have to do the covenant. The new covenant is, Chuck says, that's my God and I want to serve him, and God says, those are my people. Do you see what the difference is here? The difference is one of desire and commitment. I think this is a huge point. This could be a really huge point for Christians today, because you are not a Christian because your parents took you to church and forced you to obey all the rules that are laid out in the Bible. That's the Old Testament system. The New Testament system is you are a Christian because you say, you are my God and I love you and I want to serve you. You made the choice yourself. Those are different. I think I got Joanne over here.
Just that under the old law, you were God's chosen, and then you learned the law. And under the new law, you knew the law, and then, see, I'm not sure if I'm saying that.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Then you became the child.
Yeah. You're not a child of God and then you learn the law. In the New Testament, you learn about Jesus and then you become a child of God. That's right. That's right. So then I'm going to run out of time here, so let me point you to the last thing. And we're not going to talk about the last thing because that's where this whole text is moving. The last thing under the new... here you go, 33. They're God's people because they know him and because they want to serve him and obey him. And then the last part of verse 34, this is the new covenant. And I think this is what Mike was talking about a second ago. He says in the new covenant, I will forgive their iniquity and I will remember their sins no more. So that line, I don't know how to mark this in your Bible, although you might highlight that orange as the heading of the next section. From this point on, in chapters 9 and 10, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how God said under the new covenant, there is true and real forgiveness of sins. That's the heading. So when we come to class on Wednesday, I said, the last point, Jesus is a priest forever. This point, Jesus is a priest because he's in a better place. The next point, under Jesus' priesthood, there is true forgiveness of sins. That's going to be our next major point of conversation. It's really strategically well done, the way that this letter just flows, so long as you follow the flow. Any comments? Our class time is over, so I'll stop and you can... any comments or questions? I will need to send an email out. There's two things that I didn't get to do in this class, poor time management. Number one, in Ezekiel and Jeremiah, there are at least 3 major passages that I wanted us to read together about how God said, I'm going to restore you from captivity, and I'm going to put my law on your heart, and I'm going to be your God, and you're going to be my people. This is not just a Jeremiah 31 thing, and I would like for you to read those passages and know where they are and mark them in your Bible. Number 2, this is a real bummer. But number 2, the second thing I really wanted to talk about was the application of this. And the application is, hey, listen, the new covenant under Jesus is different from the old covenant because of the kind of people that are in this covenant. They want to know him and they want to obey him and serve him. That should have a lot to do with us. We don't do what we do because we have to. We do what we do because he is our God and we are his people and we want to serve him and obey him and love him and know him. That's the defining character. And it's like, well, that's not me. Well, you probably should think about that because that's what the new covenant is. Okay. Next time we'll get into the forgiveness of sins. And you can ask your questions that I didn't leave time for.